Welcome to the George Washington University for an evening of tribute to Ted Turner and introducing the Ted Turner Professor of Environmental Media.
He had a kind of reputation of being a sort of wild man.
Somebody who was doing more wild stuff than almost anyone.
He's unafraid.
Captain Outrageous, mouth of the South. He thinks it, he says it.
He could tell you to go to hell in such a way that you'd look forward to the trip.
It was not what I expected at all.
Nobody expected it.
His sheer grit and determination and his boldness, he has guts.
A brash billionaire businessman whose every move was always part of a bigger plan.
He can anticipate problems he can see around corners.
Not just one corner, many corners.
It started with an idea so audacious, so unthinkable.
Nobody believed he could pull it off.
Absolutely crazy. Absolutely crazy.
Except once in a lifetime, a guy like him comes along. Ted Turner.
He wanted to save the world.
Save everything. Save everything.
It's all part of saving everything.
There you go.
I think I'm getting it.
We're fast approaching the tipping point.
Now the question is, do we rise up?
That is pretty dang cool.
Well, good evening, everybody. That was Sanjay Gupta's Captain Planet documentary, capturing the life of Ted Turner. Ted Turner, the entrepreneur, Ted Turner, the competitor, Ted Turner, the television visionary, the media mogul, the philanthropist, the environmentalist. I'm Frank Sesno, and I've been working on this for a really long time with a bunch of you. How many in this room worked with Ted Turner? Raise your hand. How many in this room have heard Ted Turner speak? How many in this room have been in the room and Ted Turner has spoken to you? Okay, this is going to be a ride. Welcome. It's an amazing thing. This really is the culmination of a dream. It's the culmination of a dream to honor Ted, to share his audacious, and you'll hear that word a lot, his audacious spirit, to teach the future and teach future storytellers at this powerhouse of a university forever in Ted's name. So a lot of you worked with Ted, and for those of you who didn't, you can check out YouTube. He's all over the place. You can listen to him a lot. I joined CNN when the network was just 4 years old. We didn't have much money. We were deeply in the red. It took 3 years before I made my first trip down to Atlanta because there's no money to buy a plane ticket. Some of you remember those days. Over 21 years, I had an opportunity to be White House correspondent, anchor, Sunday talk show host, Washington bureau chief. It was an incredible run, and so many of you, so many of us have had an incredible run because of Ted's audacious, outrageous, total take-it-on attitude. When I became the director of the School of Media and Public Affairs here, which is in this building, and our director, Sylvia Wasteboard, is here, and our wonderful dean, Paul Walbeck, is here. indeed, I started thinking, and I got together with some of my good friends at CNN and elsewhere and said, how about this? And we hatched this idea. And I do want to shout out a special thanks to Rick Davis, who helped hatch the idea, to Phil Kent, Sam Feist, Char Beals, Decker Anstrom, and Matt Canella, who helped work so hard to raise the funds and to contribute the funds and to bring others on board that got us here tonight. So thanks to you all so much. Thank you, Phil. Phil Kent has been unbelievable. Anyway, this is the perfect place to honor Ted in this way. It's the perfect place to inspire other young, fearless global citizens to tell stories that inform, engage, connect, motivate, and inspire action on behalf of this planet, which needs those things very much. This endowment will create a professor of environmental media. You'll hear lots about that. You'll meet him later. It provides for an annual event in Ted's name to elevate vital issues and celebrate great storytelling. So please come back. Because as Ted knows so well, and Ted, if you're watching, as you know so well, and as those of you who work with him, because that's what he wanted to, that's what he said, you work with me, not for me. Storytelling matters. Stories have power. Stories change minds and they move us. It's why students and faculty come here to this place. A decade ago, more than that now, I started this thing called Planet Forward. I slipped and made mention of that earlier because I say it so much. It's a multimedia story platform that engages students here at GW and across the country, colleges and universities across the country, to tell stories about ideas, innovations, research, people who can move the planet forward. And that's what we're doing. Endowed professorships are incredibly prestigious and tangible statements about a university's commitment to research, creative work, teaching, and learning. So we're going to hear all about that tonight, and I really hope you're going to have fun, right? Because you can't know Ted without being willing to have a little fun, right? When things go right and when they go a little off script. We won't do that at all tonight, of course. It is now my immense pleasure and privilege to introduce to you the leader of this amazing institution where we honor Ted, who provides vision and guidance and leadership every day. Please join me in welcoming President Mark Wright.
Thank you, Frank, and welcome to all. I want to take a little time to thank Frank. He is a distinguished professor. For those in the media, there's a job beyond, and Frank is doing it extraordinarily well. I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to work with him, and I believe that he is an inspiration. I learned about this endowed professorship from him, and he and his team have done a tremendous job. Save everything. This is Ted Turner's audacious challenge. We are gathered here tonight to rise to meet this challenge. The George Washington University is committed to preparing the next generation of leaders to solve the world's most challenging problems. And we're attracting enthusiastic, hardworking, talented, passionate people to do just that. In the Columbian College of Arts and Sciences, home to the School of Media and Public Affairs, our commitment to sustainability is multidisciplinary. Environmental storytelling embodied in the filmmaking of John Sutter, the inaugural Turner Endowed Professor of Environmental Media, exists alongside biologists studying ghost forest on the Chesapeake, chemists studying environmental and green chemistry, and geographers studying the Arctic, where rapid changes in the permafrost are imminently threatening cultures and communities. And of course, students here and elsewhere are researching and producing remarkable stories for our Planet Forward project led by Frank Sesno. At GW, everyone, including our faculty and students and staff in health and medicine, law, education, business, international affairs, engineering, public policy, and the arts and sciences, everyone is contributing to ideas and research in sustainability, climate change, and environmental justice in an effort to save everything. We also are building on what makes us unique. I like to say distinguishable, along with being distinguished. Like our location, just 3 blocks from the White House, the Capitol just a short distance away, and 3 blocks to the west, the State Department. This allows our students and faculty to be a part of making positive change in this global center that means so much to the United States and to the rest of the world. GW's national and globally engaged students and faculty, like Ted Turner, do not shy away from a challenge, but the stakes are high. We have only one planet, and we need to do everything in our power to sustain life on this planet. To do this, we will need to rely on the work of the current and next generation of leaders. Tonight, as we honor Ted Turner and introduce John Sutter as the inaugural holder of the professorship in his name, we commit together and in perpetuity to inspiring the next generation of leaders here at the George Washington University School of Media and Public Affairs. This school will use media to its best and highest purpose. With this endowed position in Ted Turner's name, the students of GW will forever have an expert teaching them how to share information and narratives that transport people to unexpected places. Tonight, as we honor Ted Turner, who inspired the creation of this endowed professorship in his name, we are enabling our students and faculty to rise to the critical challenges of the future. Thank you for those who have contributed to the endowment. We appreciate your investment in George Washington University, and we thank you for raising up this university to even greater heights by creating the Ted Turner Professor of Environmental Media. There is still an opportunity to contribute to this professorship. As Frank indicated, there are many important opportunities that lie ahead. And I want to underscore the notion of perpetuity. An endowment is forever. This professorship will last as long as the university itself. We're now in our 3rd century, and I expect this institution will continue to thrive long into the future, especially if we address the challenges of save everything. I now invite you to join me in watching a tribute to Ted Turner.
Well, when are we ready?
Down in Atlanta, Georgia, lives a legendary dude. In New York, they say he's crazy. In Newport, they call him rude. And to those Bel Air mansions where Cadillacs a toy, he never gets invited, cause he's just a good old boy. Though society may shun him, cause he won't toe their line. To the people across the country, Teddy Turner's doing fine. Cause he was cable when cable wasn't cool. When he went cable, they called that boy a fool. The experts say yet its time ain't come. Now CNN is number one.
Heck, all I did was jump the gun.
Cable wasn't good. And those network guys.
Visionary. Visionary.
He thinks on a scale that most of us can't comprehend.
And he was audacious, and he was trying to change the world.
When he wanted to do something, he was intent on doing it. He thought bigger than anybody I've ever known. And the more somebody told him he couldn't do something, the more intent he was on doing it.
You know, a lot of times people give up just when they're on the verge of succeeding. You know, I just never quit.
Lead, follow, or get out of the way, he'd say. Ted took on the big three networks, first with the Superstation and then with CNN.
He wanted us to be as good as, if not better than, the great newspapers of the world. He wanted CNN to distribute truthful information behind the Iron Curtain and into nations where freedom of the press did not exist.
I dedicate the news channel for America, the cable news network.
He had an idea of how he was going to build it. And most people said, it can't be done. It won't happen. He knew it could be done, and he knew he could do it.
I do remember that he was walking through the newsroom when we were doing rehearsals. And later I said to my boss, the vice president of sports, I said, Bill, we need to talk to Ted because these rehearsals are going terribly. And we need to push back the start of CNN. And Bill said, okay, I'll go talk to him. And he came back to me the next day and he said, I talked to Ted, and Ted said, no way. I told the cable operators we were starting on June 1st, 1980, and damn it, we're starting on June 1st, 1980.
People want to know what's happening right now, and we give it to them.
What does it feel like to know that you started all this?
Good.
We do not know. I'd say to Ted, for us to really own the story of the war in Iraq, and it's going to cost many millions more than what we're budgeted to do all that. He said, how much? I said, well, Ted, it could be $5 to $30 million that we don't have budgeted. He said, you spend whatever you think it takes, pal. I walked out of that office. I said to Ed Turner, I mean, this is amazing. We have just been told to spend whatever it takes to prepare for a war. And when the war started, boom, all the power went out in Iraq, all electrical services, all whatever. Guess who still was up?
He democratized news, in effect. Everybody has access to news.
Ted Turner's presence is still felt all throughout CNN. Even today, we're the only network that doesn't have a foreign desk or foreign correspondents or foreign bureaus. At CNN, we have an international desk, international bureaus, international correspondents. And that's because to Ted, CNN was a global network. There could be nothing foreign to CNN. He actually called the word foreign the F word, and any CNN employee who said the F word near Ted or he heard about it, they were subject to a $50 fine. And so the fine may be gone, but nobody at CNN uses the F word, and that's just part of Ted's legacy.
Ted did not believe anyone was a foreigner. CNN really changed the world and made us a global village.
So I decided, though, what would be really exciting to do.
I mean, it opened the entire planet to information. But built on top of that was his commitment to global peace, his $1 billion contribution to the United Nations.
How did you come to that figure?
Well, because a billion's a good round number, you know?
I think Ted's a farmer. That's the word Kofi Annan, the former Secretary General of the United Nations, used. Because he saw Ted as a planter of seeds for our peace, for our freedom, for long-term understanding globally, and for taking care of the planet. And that he understood a farmer cares for his land over the long term. And that's what Ted was. He was a guardian of the best ideas that we stand for and live for.
Ted's commitment to the environment and climate was so way ahead of everyone else's.
No private individual has done as much for conservation as Ted Turner. A huge accomplishment.
the cartoon Captain Planet. He was obsessed with getting it popularized.
Captain Planet, we love you. You changed the way we see the world.
I mean, look at his land holdings. He had 2 million acres, but he had a vision of what he was going to do with those 2 million acres in terms of conservation. And he had a vision of how he could bring back bison on those land and make them into a form of meat production that was sustainable. He's brought bison back into our diet.
You know, one of the things I think about with Ted is that it was about people. It wasn't about labels. Right? It was about people. He saw people and he saw potential, and he was willing to give them opportunity.
He's got a great deal of empathy, possessed with an inner core of decency that you don't find in many people.
For me, as a CEO, I think about that often. I think about people who might be the tiniest voice in the room, but have the biggest idea in the room. I think about giving people opportunity that may have some room to grow, but really you can see that they have character, they have heart, and they have a fighting spirit. I think those are things that are really emblematic of who Ted is.
To have a living legacy where every year there'll be a professor at George Washington University in the nation's capital teaching environmental journalism and how to make it interesting and how to make it relevant is, I think, a great living testament to Ted Turner.
Thank you, Ted, for continuing to lead. It's why we are all so proud to be involved with this program in your name, to educate and raise awareness for your lifelong mission to protect the planet and its people.
As I like to say, I'm Wolf Blitzer, and you're in the Situation Room. It's about 6 o'clock at night. So. We all love Ted. He has been so special. All of us who worked with him and know him, he's really been amazing, and we just get a little flavor of that in that video. On a personal level, he hired me at CNN many years ago. It was, my first day at CNN was May 8th, 1990. And he said to me, well, you're gonna be our Pentagon correspondent, and it's probably gonna be pretty slow out there right now. This is the end of the Cold War. The military, is getting smaller and smaller, and probably it's gonna be a little boring. But a few weeks later, on August 1st, 1990, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, and we started the first Gulf War, as you probably, many of you were old enough remember. And when Ted hired me, he said, remember, Wolf, the news comes first. We are the cable news, capital N, capital E, capital W, capital S. We're the cable news network, and that's what we do. And the news comes first. And I discovered that during the first Gulf War and immediately afterwards, when I was working 7 days a week, and I would come home and say to my wife and my daughter, the news comes first. That's what. After the war, and I'd been working for weeks without a day off, we finally took a few days off, went to Hilton Head, and Lynn, who's here, she'll remember, Tom Johnson, who was then the president of CNN, called me at Hilton Head and said, Wolf, there's been a coup, a KGB coup in the Soviet Union. We need you to go to Moscow right away. And I felt like saying, but I'm on vacation. And I didn't say that. And I said, I understand. The news comes first. And the next day, Lynn and my daughter, we all flew home to Washington, and I was on a flight to Moscow to cover the failed coup in the Soviet Union, because the news comes first. Now, he was really a remarkable man, because not only did he want a 24/7 cable news network to operate here in the United States, he was determined that it would operate all over the world. And he had this vision that if people all over the world were watching the same news, maybe that would be good for the world. And maybe that would be good for peace, and that would be good for harmony and all of that. I'm not so sure that worked out necessarily like that, but he wanted CNN to be live around the world. And it is, and it has been all these many years, live around the world. And as Christiana Manpour is here with me, will tell you, we can go anywhere in the world and people will stop us and recognize us and thank us for what we're doing. And I'm so proud that over these 33 years plus that I've been at CNN, that I've been part of that Ted Turner experience, the House of Ted Turner, as we like to call it. He really deserves so much credit for changing the world and for making it such a better place, hopefully. The news, we believe in the news, and we're still doing what what he wanted us to do, and I'm so happy that that is happening. We have a terrific panel, and I want to invite our panelists to come up here and share a few thoughts. And let me start with Kathy Calvert, the founding president and CEO of the United Nations Foundation. Kathy, come on up. Open seating. Okay. Wanya Lucas, president and CEO, Hallmark Media. And Christiana Manpour, our chief international anchor and good friend. All right, I guess this seat must be for me.
It's for you.
All right, let me start with Kathy.
All right.
Well, we all know that Ted helped create the United Nations Foundation. He made a contribution to the United Nations for a mere $1 billion. That's with a B, $1 billion. He donated to the United Nations Foundation, created it, because he said at the time, he said he wants to solve problems without passports. That's a quote from Ted. So Kathy, what has Ted's commitment to the planet and to philanthropy, for that matter, for the United Nations meant for the world?
Well, thanks, Wolf. It's great to be here. Congratulations, Frank, and everyone who participated in this. And I am so glad we have an all-women panel on the eve of International Women's Day. I think Ted would be happy. You know, Ted always said we need a ban on men in public office for 100 years because men have been doing it for thousands of years and they've mucked it up something terrible. But Ted really did change the world through CNN. But again, when he made the gift 25 years ago, if you can believe that, to support the UN and UN causes. And I'd say 3 ways he changed the world. The first was, we're going to use that word again, audacious philanthropy. Nobody had done a gift like that big, that awesomely visionary, and that bold enough not to even put his name on it. So when Ted made the gift, he then challenged other billionaires to follow suit, and all of us to follow suit. And by God, it has made a difference in the world that so many people have stepped up and followed Ted's lead. So bold philanthropy, number 1. Number 2, he gave the UN a shot in the arm just when it needed it, politically and financially. It was in trouble in the US. He even thought he might give the money and sue to get his money back because it was paying off the US dues. But that didn't happen. We did do a foundation, and the idea was the foundation would invite others to join it in making changes in the world. Kofi Annan even said, you can use the name, which is pretty amazing as the Secretary General to give the name to an entity that was brand new. And then third is really what happened afterward, because 25 years after the gift was given, the impact and value of Ted's gift has more than doubled. And that's quite amazing. And he said at the time it was the best investment he ever made because it paved the way to global problem solving. And that's exactly what happened. Companies, other wealthy investors, individuals, nonprofits, all have joined together in the UN's life-changing, life-saving work. And he kind of really helped us lead through saying anyone can make a difference and everyone should. It really is great.
So Kathy, what I hear you saying is that if it had not been for Ted Turner, the UN Foundation would not be where it is today.
Absolutely not. I mean, Ted's vision and the trust the UN had in him was significant. And they knew he had issues of his own, but he always said, we follow and serve. We're there to help the UN be the best it can be. And I would say the UN is not your grandfather's UN as a result of Ted, because he opened the door to lots of other participants playing a role in global problem solving in hunger and women's rights, and certainly climate, which was, of course, one of Ted's passions and one of the things we've spent most of the time on. I'm really proud that the foundation under Tim Wirth, who was the founding president, I was the second, and our current president, Elizabeth Cousins, have really made the environment, climate, oceans, regenerative agriculture, critical issues that everybody can work on. And we're trying to, help bring along a new generation of Planeteers in the name of Captain Planet. So it's really been a great ride. And I think Ted always called himself just a banana in the bunch on the board, because he knew it was important for his vision to be there, but he had to rely on others, just as he did at CNN.
He was so passionate. He is so passionate about the environment. And when I spent some quality time with him at his ranch out in Montana, you could see that simply just walking around. And when he would look at all the different plants and the animals and everything else, it would mean so much to him.
And he pulls it out of other people and helps them see it if they don't see it already. Watching him walk into the United Nations, people would stop and pause and then burst into applause to say thank you for what he had done to help save that institution, but also to help make it something that everybody could participate in.
Yep. All right, Wanya, let's talk a little bit about your experiences with TED. You're the president and CEO of Hallmark Media. Give us a little background on your family history with TED.
Sure. So my experience with TED is, although I did work for CNN and for Turner for many years, is largely personal. And I remember being in elementary school and my dad coming home and saying, there's this new owner of the Braves and his name's Ted Turner. And he was describing him as this really different person than the previous owner. But one of the things I would say about Ted that I think is a through line is that he recognized talent. My dad was he was in a job, but he didn't have a pathway to become the first Black general manager in baseball until Ted saw him. And I mean, really saw him. He understood his intellect. He spent time with him talking baseball. He rolled up his sleeves and they sort of had a magnetic board and they talked about players and talent. And so early on, he was the first person to really understand that my father had great potential. And so they ended up, actually, the team that my father put together along with Ted won the World Series many years later. Unfortunately, my father died in 1979. And when my father passed away, the other thing that I learned about Ted was that he was compassionate. I remember him walking into the hospital and seeing my mother, Ruby Lucas, who's here today, and saying to her, I will always take care of you. I was heading out to college. We're trying to figure out how am I going to pay for college. And Ted helped me pay for college. And years later, when I worked at CNN, I would see him in the elevator and he'd say, didn't I put you through college? And I'm like, yes, you did. And thank you. Thank you. But my mother was a teacher. And again, just seeing talent. And I remember Ted was just like, when are you going to retire? When are you going to retire? And so Ted encouraged my mother to retire. She came to Turner Broadcasting as the first VP of Community Affairs. There she started Turner Volunteer Day, where volunteers worked all around the globe together, just understanding the spirit of TED, which was to make the planet and the surroundings around you better. And then he had the audacious plan to put my mother and my uncle, the late Hank Aaron, on the board of directors. This is in 1981, y'all. They weren't putting a lot of Black people on the board of directors back then. There was no DEI back then, right? And so it was just because he understood their ability to contribute. And I'll tell you a story my mother told me just recently. She was in the boardroom, and I'm talking Brian Roberts, I'm talking John Malone, I'm talking mega people in the boardroom. And she, because she was a teacher, she says, well, what's the content for kids? And there was one board member, not to be named, not the two I've named, by the way, who said, Ted doesn't care about kids. And then Ted said to the board members, we're going to look into kids programming. Betty Cohen, you go out there and see if there's anything there. That became Cartoon Network. So the ability to understand the perceived smallest voice in the room could have the most powerful idea. That was Ted Turner. That is Ted Turner.
And you. And Wanya, you introduced me to your mom before this program. She is here right now. She made history. The first African-American woman to serve on a corporate board, media board here in the United States. Is that right?
That's right. Wow. And because of Ted Turner, I had two goals, because my parents started from nothing and they achieved great things. I wanted to be a GM, check, and I wanted to be a board member, check. So thank you, Mom. Thank you, Ted Turner.
And Mom, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, as we say. It really is so nice to have both of you. But give us a little sense of, because I know it's significant, Ted's impact on Atlanta's African-American community.
Yeah, sure. So the Braves Stadium was built in a historically Black neighborhood, and it's called Summerhill. And one of the things that Ted did was he understood the importance of community. He still does. And so one of the things that he worked with my father is really trying to do things like put basketball courts, basketball goals in the parking lot so that the neighborhood kids would have a place and a space to play. Other things like recognizing they needed a gathering space because it was also a very dangerous neighborhood. And so together they created, well, with my mother and others, they created the YMCA in that neighborhood so the kids could have a place to go after school. Ted, through some of his work at Turner and the work that my mother led, also just making sure that as we were giving back to the community, in Atlanta, that we didn't forget those other neighborhoods, those underserved neighborhoods, and making sure that it wasn't just a drive-by, but that we had a lasting impact in those neighborhoods through programs, through presence, really meaningful change in the neighborhoods, not just Summerhill, but throughout Atlanta through the Turner Volunteer Days that continued. I don't know if they still happen now, but they certainly continued for many years.
He really did amazing things in the African-American community in Atlanta and indeed around the country. Christiana Amanpour, this is Christiana. I don't know if you've ever seen her on television. Christiana and I have covered a lot of the same stories over the years. And I was thinking, Christiane, earlier today, this morning, very early this morning, I had a chance to interview the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. And one of the first things he said to me was he thanked me and he wanted to thank CNN for all of our coverage of what has been going on following the brutal Russian invasion of Ukraine. And Christian's been there several times now since this war started more than a year ago. But Christian, of course, I remember when you were covering the first Gulf War and the Scud missiles were coming in, and you were, dodging those missiles, as a lot of us remember. But give us a sense of the truly amazing impact that CNN has had globally over these years.
Well, I consider Ted a revolutionary. I think that he wasn't just one banana in a bunch. He was absolutely the leader without whom none of this would have been possible. And he created a completely different, framework with which the world could actually see each other and see itself. And so what you just quoted from President Zelensky is quintessential Ted Turner. It's come full circle because his passion, as far as we learned, when we joined, was not just to create this first ever 24/7. And as we all know, everything that has come since is a copy of what Ted Turner created. Every platform is a copy of what Ted Turner created. He started this. Nobody else had done it before. And that's what he said. The thing is, I had these ideas, or I was there first, or whatever. Everything he did, whether it was philanthropy, care for the environment, the idea of breaking down barriers between the Soviet Union as it was there and the United States, whether it was, all these things he did, as they say, before it was cool. So one thing he wanted to do was not just take, news from societies that believed in truth and facts and independent media into state-run news operations. But he also wanted to bring the world back to America. And I think that was the big differentiator that he created with CNN. He made it a place where Americans could also see the rest of the world. And as Sam said in that piece there, he didn't want to use the word foreign at all. He believed that there was no such thing as the other. And I know that does sound quaint, but it's a foundational mission statement for me. I mean, I learned how to report, how to tell the news, how to frame it, how to think about the world because of what I was told Ted Turner believed in and that I worked for this person. So in that regard, it absolutely changed the world. And he was also massively brave, obviously, not just to take risks, but literally brave. I remember interviewing him for a nice segment and talking to him about many things about his life, but including the things that don't often get talked about in these forums because they're mostly about news and things. But not just the America's Cup, but the what was it called, the Whitbread Cup or whatever it is around the Isle of Wight. The guy nearly died. In fact, dozens of people were injured and killed in a race that he white-knuckled to the end. And that was just to hear him tell that story, you suddenly realize what kind of a person he is, to take the risks and give the opportunities to your community and to your father and etc. to do what he did for the UN Foundation and for the UN, which wasn't just giving $1 billion. It was saying to the United States of America, you are deadbeats, you are not putting your money where you should and paying your dues to the UN. Right. I'll do it. Yeah. And he did it. And that kind of example, whether on a global level, on a national level, or for employees, like I was and am, is amazing. It's just such a gift to be able to work for somebody who makes you feel, or for whom you feel such respect and admiration and genuine sense of awe. And I just think that's just a remarkable thing. And I also remember, I mean, obviously from the Gulf War, then we went on to things like Bosnia and other very dangerous places, which were different kind of wars because it wasn't great big set pieces and organized warfare. It was wars against civilians, which you're seeing in Ukraine right now. And we as journalists were part of the civilian population. And so many journalists got wounded and killed in Bosnia. And it was the first place in modern history, or maybe in ever, where journalists were actually targeted and were actually, they wanted to shut the news up, so they shut us up. They tried to shut us up. And one of our colleagues, Margaret Moth, was shot in the face and grievously wounded. And of course, at the time, Tom Johnson was president. But the ripple of care that emanated, that Margaret was cared for, as you say, you were cared for, your family was cared for, our family was cared for. In extremis every single time. There was no limit to what Ted Turner, and I assume it came from the top, to what CNN did for its people in the field. And I think that is a remarkable, remarkable testament to the kind of family that he built. And it's going to sound a bit crass now, but I met him shortly thereafter, one of the times I met him when I came back from the field to Atlanta. And I remember, I was walking in this big atrium or whatever, and he was coming, and every time Ted Turner entered your sort of space, you sort of jittered a bit. I mean, he was formidable. And he said, "Hey, Christiane." And I'm like, "Yes, yep, yes, Ted, I'm here." And he said, "How are you doing?" I said, "I'm good, I'm good." He said, "Well, the great thing is you haven't had your face shot off. I'm just so glad to see that you're still, all in one piece." I'm like, "Yes, Ted." Oh my. And off he went. Off he went. So, he was pretty funny. He is pretty funny. And you can see it in those clips. He's a very funny person. He's incredibly brave. He's cutting edge. And I don't know that there's anybody like him. He's almost like a statesperson. When you see him sit next to Gorbachev, he is Gorbachev's equal in what he has done. And the fact that there was a CNN that enabled the world to see the machinations that led to the collapse of the Soviet system and the collapse of the Iron Curtain was quite incredible. There was nothing before CNN that could bring that into your living room and show it in real time. And obviously including, the first Gulf War, where it wasn't just that we were there. Ted Turner insisted that if we wanted to be in Baghdad, we would be able to say it, because the American government told CNN and all the others to evacuate. And everybody else did. But guess who didn't? CNN.
We stayed there.
Yep. And to this day, that's our founding explosions in all of our promos.
Yeah, it really was an amazing experience, and you got to give Ted Turner the credit, because
it's only him.
He would always say, "Look, you don't have to stay, but if you want to stay, we'll support you." And of course, Peter Arnett, John Holloman, Bernie Shaw, they all stayed in Baghdad. We were the only television network that had live coverage coming out when the bombs started coming into Baghdad.
And just, I'm sure, because you're interested, as it said in the piece, all the electricity went off, right? So nobody could broadcast out of there. CNN somehow, over the weeks and months that led up to the actual war, had secreted in Baghdad, without the heavies and the thugs knowing, this thing called a 4-wire. And it enabled CNN to broadcast from there without the government knowing or understanding.
Right.
Ted once, I asked him, all the entrepreneurs love Ted. And I said, they love you because you're such a good risk taker. And he said, I've never taken a risk because I always think it through and know beforehand. I'm just curious if you saw that, because I thought that was such a different answer than I expected from a man who looks
certain people have different risk tolerance levels.
And it's true. Ted was willing to take risks. And I'll give you one example. I was the Pentagon correspondent when the bombs started, when the war started. And all of the top military brass and political leadership of the Pentagon came to me and said, "Are you guys crazy? Why are you keeping your people at the El Rashid Hotel in Baghdad? That the first floor of that hotel is Iraqi intelligence, and we're going to bomb the shit out of it. And you better get your people out right away." And of course, I passed that along to the leadership of CNN, including Ted. And I was getting these warnings from the Secretary of Defense, Dick Cheney, from the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Colin Powell. They were coming to me knowing I was representing CNN at the Pentagon, saying, "Get your people out of there." They were saying the same thing to all the other networks, and all the other networks got their people out of there. We stayed, and we reported the news because Ted, encouraged us to report the news from the scene of where this war was taking place. You remember that?
Yeah, absolutely. And just one last note, if I have a moment, just to bring it full circle. When I did this last interview with him, which was a few years ago, I said to him, Ted, many young people look at you and ask, and how can I make my first billion? And without blinking, he said, green technology, the environment. That's how people today can make a fortune. And so it brings us full circle to this.
Yeah. Right back to these.
You want to give us a quick thought as you're listening to all of this, how he's impacted you?
Oh, the impact for me was watching Ted's quality of character with other people. He brings joy to anybody who sees him. You see him picking up trash when you go walking with him on the streets of New York. You see young people reaching out, because of Captain Planet and the call to action, and these entrepreneurs who sort of thought he was a fellow dreamer. I loved how Ted could make anybody comfortable, no matter what country we were in. He had respect, but also such an open heart that everyone felt immediately comfortable, whether it was the head of the Indian government or the lowest person in a camp where we were feeding children. Ted just exuded humanity. I think that's his greatest skill.
Wanya, give us a thought about how his personality impacted your life.
Sure. I would say the power of paying it forward. And by that, I mean, I remember watching Captain Planet and how excited I was about, let's just talk about way ahead of your time, right? Years later, I went to the Weather Channel and we started the first environment show on television. It was called Forecast Earth. And I did that because Ted Turner planted that seed. And having the ability to then pay it forward, which I encourage everyone that works with me or I work with, always pay it forward. So to me, I think about how he paid it forward, not just in terms of programming, but also in terms of how I treat people, how I give people, how I see people, how I give people opportunities, even the quietest voice in the room. That's how I pay it forward every day.
Well, I think all of us got a better sense about Ted Turner from these three ladies right now, and I want to thank them once again for joining us and thank them for what they've been doing. All right. We are going to go back to our seats right now, but I want to get a big round of applause for Frank Sesno, who's going to be coming up here and saying a few more words.
Well, that's quite a treat. Wolf and Christian's come here from London, and Wanya's come up. Wanya, where did you come from?
Georgia.
Georgia, okay. And Wolf came from CNN, which is where the news comes first. So, you know. When Ted started CNN, anybody in the room when Ted started CNN? How many hands? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1980. Few things went wrong along the way when we first started out, like lights exploded and cameras didn't go on and prompters didn't work. And we had a few moments like that, but most things did. Most things did. And the experiment worked, and it changed, as you heard, journalism, diplomacy, and decision-making. I mean, like my good friends, Wolf and Christian, I experienced this. When I was at CNN, I remember interviewing a president from another country one time. And before we went on the air, he said, Mr. Sesno, I want to thank you, and I want to thank CNN, because you just aired congressional hearings live, American congressional hearings live, that we saw that in our country, and you helped my citizens learn about democracy. I mean, think about the power of that and what that says and signals. And I sat there and I realized, oh my God, you know what we do on this camera? It really, really matters. The media landscape has changed so much since CNN went on the air. But I think, as Wolf said, news is still CNN's middle name. And the commitment to covering the planet, because the stories have changed, has intensified. It is now, all right, so you think, okay, well, all right, we've been talking pretty well in the past tense. How about the future tense? It's now a great pleasure to introduce to you the current CEO of CNN Worldwide, and the man who's running CNN and this global amazing thing, Chris Licht. So Chris, please join us. Welcome.
Good to be here.
I'm so delighted you're here. He's a man of extremes, by the way, because he did Late Night with Stephen Colbert and CBS This Morning and Morning Joe. So like
a lot of extremes, yeah, right.
You don't sleep, right?
Yeah.
Strong commitment at CNN to covering climate and the planet now. And I think we might want to start with a postcard that you arranged for
Interesting. Maybe we should, Frank.
Should we do that?
Yes.
All right. A postcard from Patagonia.
Thank you, Chris. Cheers, G-Dub. True story. When I was coming out of a communication school vastly inferior to yours, I remember the exact moment I watched Wolf Blitzer, Peter Arnett, Bernie Shaw broadcast the opening shots of the Gulf War. And I said to my grandparents, I want to do that. I want to work there and tell really big stories for a living. And as luck would have it, 30 years later, I'm working at CNN. I happen to be at the tip of South America here in Patagonia, and I'm about to get on a boat with a bunch of scientists and set sail for Antarctica to tell some of the biggest stories of the day. And none of this would have been possible without Ted Turner. He wasn't just Captain Courageous of the First Amendment. He was a sailor who understood sea and sky, and a rancher who understood land use, and a conservationist who understood your grandparents can't spend their inheritance on a dead planet. And so I am proud to be the first ever network chief climate correspondent. I think everybody is destined to cover this beat sooner or later, but I'm really proud that our team just won the Emmy for Best Science Coverage, and we're committed to this story. It touches every aspect of our lives, and we come at it not just from the disaster in science, but from the empathy and innovation and context that's needed to solve this thing. And as our team grows, I promise we're going to do our best to make Ted proud.
Chris, that's Bill Weir, if you don't know him.
That's our Captain Planet.
That's your Captain Planet. What's he doing, and what's the network's approach to covering climate change and the planet?
Well, what he's doing there is very top secret, but it's part of a 1-hour special that we're doing as part of our new long form Sunday nights. But while that's exciting, really his existence shows the commitment that we have, meaning he is constantly covering stories like that. That is very flashy, right? He's heading down
It's all shot with a drone,
Antarctica and everything, but he covers everything that happens as it relates to extreme weather and a lot of what's in the news these days. He can give perspective to. So while that's flashy and that's exciting, and that is selfishly why I got him to do it, because it shows our commitment to spending the money that needs to be spent. More importantly, we have a commitment to actually using him and putting him on the air to help explain what's happening. So it's a core part of our coverage, just like we have never left Ukraine, because we're committed to telling those stories. We're committed to telling the stories of the planet. And he's perfect for it. But it's also, I mean, if there's any students here, it's also a business play.
Students here?
You find that the engagement that we have, particularly on digital, around climate stories is off the chart.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. How big is this story, and how does the audience react? Is this something the audience is drawn to?
On digital, where we see our younger audiences, absolutely. The challenge on linear, and one that sometimes people shy away from.
On television.
I'm sorry, on television. Is making it interesting. And somehow this notion that, well, if it's not sexy, it's not going to rate and we can't put that on. That's on us. It is our job to make climate change sexy and interesting and compelling. Bill Weir.
You need to be the storyteller.
Absolutely. It goes back to what you were saying before, storytelling, and it is driven by the man who founded the network. I mean, imagine if we were not covering climate change. That would be a difficult conversation for me to have with him.
You've met with Ted a couple of times.
A couple of times. The first time was actually here in Washington before I started the job, and David Zasloff said, "We're going to go see Ted." And I was like, "Whoa!" And it was an incredibly impactful meeting for me, where I looked him in the eye and said I believed in his mission, and
I do.
And we were in the elevator afterwards, going downstairs. And David said, we're going to do right by that man and his vision. And I think the we was you, and it was not a request.
So good. I'm glad to hear that. So let me ask you, how you do that, right? As I said earlier, it's a very different environment. When CNN went on the air, there was no cable, there was no internet, there was no social media, there was none of it. Today, we're inundated with this stuff. People are cutting the cord. What's the future of CNN?
The future's amazing, Frank.
I thought he might say that.
Listen,
it's a challenging environment, though, seriously.
Of course it's a challenging environment, but my job with the amazing team at CNN, and by the way, could we look at the run of show next time? I don't need to follow those legends, ever. But the job we have is to make the product as good as it can be, so that somewhere they will figure out what's the best place to distribute it. And part of that is being true to Ted's vision. It's tough for me to articulate, especially as I'm sitting watching this program. It's tough for me to articulate the humbleness that I approach this job, and the fact that whoever sits in this chair should look at it as being a caretaker of that man's vision. Because what he did, the best tribute to what he created is to keep it strong and to keep it true to what he meant when he said all of those words. That picture of him with the cigar, there's that lead follower, get out of the way little placard at the foot of it. And I know that because I have a 8-foot by 8-foot version of that in my office.
Really?
So for me, the future of CNN is finding success based on the roots of it because it's not really where you run into a lot of the competition.
One of the other things that didn't exist when CNN went on the air was the extreme polarization that we have in the country and we have in the media now. I know you've tried to tack back or just, own the center at some level and do what news is supposed to do. What does that involve?
It involves employing the best journalists in the world. And I know, best journalist. No, people that graduate from schools like this and Syracuse University, which is where I am on the advisory board of, and they're not, I'm sure, pleased I'm here, but it's employing those people that are in this business for the right reason. If you look at the people in this room who worked at CNN or who currently work at CNN, there is something in their DNA. I am married to someone that worked at CNN for over a decade. It's one of the reasons why she said it was okay for me to take this job. And it's hiring those people who are in this for the journalism. As Wolf always says, the news comes first. It is not a quip. It is not a party joke. It is a way of life. And those people aren't interested in polarization. Those people aren't interested in things going viral or having the story be about them. They are truth seekers, and CNN, we are truth tellers. And the way you minimize the polarization and the craziness is find that lane and own that lane. And I believe that to my core. My boss believes that to its core. And again, it's a reflection of what Ted's vision was of starting this thing. It was never, to get the most clicks or have famous people or that. No, the news. And I find that it is not a tough sell in my organization to say, we're going back to Ted's roots and we are going to do the news because that's why those people are there.
Bravo. Last question. What does it mean to you, to CNN, to Ted's legacy that we are creating, starting with John Sutter, this Ted Turner Professor of Environmental Media, to teach young people here what it's like to be a storyteller about this planet, to convene around Ted's name every year? What's your take on this thing we're doing?
First of all, how long is your contract here? Just for Syracuse, to have someone.
I don't think so.
To have someone.
I love them, and Syracuse is here. Thank you very much, Mark.
To have somebody with your enthusiasm and drive and love of journalism is infectious. And when we talk about the future, it is people like you inspiring students not only to get into journalism, but why? Why do you get into journalism? And from the second that we've engaged on this, just to see your passion around it, I genuinely wish I had you as a professor. But to have an endowed professorship, which is, as the president remarked, forever. It's forever. And what that does is it shows a commitment to this kind of reporting. And because it's not flashy, because it takes that extra step, because it takes saying, how am I going to tell these stories in a way that will have impact? You have to have people that love this. They have to love journalism and they have to be committed to telling these stories. And to do that, again, it's not the sexiest job in the world. It's about to be. It's about to be because everything will come back to climate change. Everything that we're talking about somehow comes back to climate change, and people are just starting to pick up on that. But the students that are here already know that, and they're pissed at us. They are pissed at us for not having realized it and kicked the can down the road. And they want to get out and they want to tell these stories, and they want to be told what's the best way to communicate. What is the best way for me to impact the world by telling these stories? And what better sign that we are ready for you than to have an endowed scholarship like that? And what a great way for Ted's legacy to put out into the world an army of kids that want to come and tell these stories, hopefully at CNN.
Bravo. Thank you so much, Chris. That's great. Thank you. Thank you so much. It's like he doesn't have enough going on in his life. So Chris, for coming down from New York and being with us, I cannot tell you how much it means to us, the time you spent with Ted, the time you're now spending with CNN, and we wish you all the great good luck to keep CNN the mighty force that it is and has been and will be. So now we're going to introduce you to the Ted Turner Professor. But the person who's going to do that is the provost here, who is the chief academic officer of this institution. And he looks across all the schools and units, and he manages this amazing academic enterprise. It is an incredible pleasure to introduce Provost Chris Bracey, who has some words and will introduce you to our professor. Chris?
Frank, thank you for the kind introduction. Tonight, it is my distinct privilege to introduce you to the George Washington University's inaugural Ted Turner Professor of Environmental Media. Before I introduce our distinguished inaugural holder, I want to briefly underline why an endowed position is so important to an academic institution. As Frank said, I'm the Chief Academic Officer at the George Washington University. That means that I am charged with enhancing the quality and impact of a GW education. That includes working to secure resources for faculty whose scholarship tackles the world's most urgent problems and enhances our academic reputation. An endowed position is one of the oldest, highest, and most impactful honors that can be bestowed upon respected faculty at a university. These positions, endowed professorships, are an investment in our faculty and our students and are a permanent anchor for the disciplines that they support. And an endowed professor position named for the most distinguished faculty of this university, like Ted Turner, is a prime example of how philanthropy can honor the legacy of a beloved pioneer while also making a tremendous impact. The Turner Endowed Professorship was created over the last 4 years by so many of you who are here this evening. More than 261 donors, many of whom are in the audience or have blessed the stage, raised over $3.2 million to establish this endowed position as a fitting honor to Ted Turner. So thank you for your support. President Wrighton mentioned that we're building on our strengths. I ask all of you to consider continuing to build on the strength of this endowed position through additional philanthropy and support that will allow the holder to be increasingly innovative and multidisciplinary in his research, engage more students, and continue to enhance the prominence of the School of Media and Public Affairs. It's a tall order, but one that meets this moment as we begin this journey together to save everything. The Turner Endowed Professorship of Environmental Media is to be held by a practitioner uniquely positioned to educate the environmental storytellers of our future. This position will be a person who is a prominent and active journalist, filmmaker, or author who will teach, continue with their creative work, and maintain an exemplary public profile. By virtue of Ted Turner's name, the George Washington University will forever be able to attract the best and brightest scholars in environmental media. This named position will help to sustain the environment by teaching and amplifying the voices of talented storytellers, a most fitting tribute to CNN's founder. Current and future holders will not only carry the honor of being associated with Ted as the founder of CNN, but also his accomplishments as an environmentalist and as a philanthropist who's donated $1 billion to found the UN Foundation, created the Nuclear Threat Initiative, and gave voice to Captain Planet. That's why I'm so very proud to recognize John D. Sutter as the first holder of this fittingly audacious and ambitious position in Ted's name. John is an Emmy Award-nominated filmmaker and independent journalist focusing on environmental reporting. He has received wide acclaim for his work, including the Livingston Award for Young Journalists. John is a CNN contributor, a Logan Nonfiction Fellow, a former Knight Science Journalism Fellow at MIT, a Knight Visiting Nieman Fellow at Harvard, and he has taught at the Poynter Institute. With his impressive resume, we are very fortunate that John has already begun to teach here at the George Washington University. And currently, he is working on 2 remarkable films. Let's watch this clip from 3 Letters to a Forgotten Future, giving us the perspective on the daily impact of climate change through the eyes of 3 young children.
Dear Norman, Monty, and Nira, I've been looking back at the footage we filmed together these last few years. It's made me realize that film is a form of memory. My hope is that these memories won't be lost.
Oh, 5 yards probably. Oh, that should be. It like whenever I go hunting, springtime, I always get that feeling. You know, some odd feeling.
So right here, you want to practice catching it and pulling it. Okay.
I'm not a prophet. I don't know what God has in store for us. But I do know when He wants us to go, He'll take us.
People in areas prone to flooding, landslides, and falling rocks should remain on alert.
When it's overcast, it's like a bad feeling to me. Like it feels like a storm that's going to happen.
We plan to meet again in the year 2050. What do these images look like when you view them from that future?
John, please come to the stage to officially accept your position as the inaugural Ted Turner Professor of Environmental Media.
Thank you so much. Wonderful. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I have a couple of reactions, John. Right, first, wow, a film that looks forward to 2050. That's ambitious. So how did you choose the children that you're choosing to feature in the film?
I met all of these kids through my work as a climate journalist, some of it at CNN actually. And this film, this project comes out of my sense that the timescale that we've been telling the climate story on is far too narrow. I mean, this is a phenomenon that occurs over decades and centuries. It exists on Earth time, not on human time. And this is my nod at that time scale and trying to get us to stretch our collective memory and think about the magnitude of the changes that are happening around us.
Great. And John, you've already started teaching, as I mentioned, here at GW. What stands out to you about your students, and what are you hoping to impart to them?
I mean, it's been just like a joy and a pleasure, and I'm so honored by this, by the way. The students here are bright, they're curious. I never have any trouble getting a conversation going in class. And they're super, super passionate about these issues. I don't like the sentiment that, that we older people are heaping responsibility onto the youth of the world to figure these problems out for us. I think that's on us. But I get an incredible amount of inspiration from the students here, and drive to do my own work and for all of us to be a little bit more creative in the way that we approach these these big questions. And some of my students are actually here tonight. I don't know if they could stand and we could honor them. I feel like that's a big part of this.
All right, well, thank you, John. And here is the memorialization of your installation as the inaugural chair.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
And now I will turn things back over to Frank.
It's such a great pleasure and just such a great privilege to have you here. And you're going to do amazing things. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So I should say, we got a little head start on teaching in Ted's name. So this past fall, we took 4 students to McGinley Ranch in very remote, very northeast Nebraska. And the students looked at the work that's being done there on regenerative agriculture and soil health and growing topsoil and bison. And one of our students, speaking of audacious, let's just say she explored the bison from all angles. It was never mind. And there's Hannah and Vidya, 2 GW students. Hannah's in the room. Hannah, where are you? Over here. And they did stories. They produced stories from this amazing trip, looking out over the 80,000 acres of this one ranch, of the 1.85 million acres that's on Ted's ranches. And Mark Kostler came all the way from Montana. He oversees all these ranches to show us the way, to teach what Ted is doing and what's being done there in the name of regenerative agriculture. And he's a pretty good cook with those bison steaks if you're a meat eater. And Mark's with us. Mark came from Montana. Mark, would you stand up, please? When Ted has spoken, whether it's in front of the camera or in front of the United Nations, he does not mince words. How about a minute and a half in Ted's own words?
The message is being hammered home that we need to do something about the environment, as Klaus Nobel so eloquently described. And people can't say they don't know about it anymore. And there's another thing that people, naysayers, say, well, it's going to cost us too much money to clean up the environment and do these things. That's a bunch of bull. And remember this, at least from my standpoint, if there is a big continuing disaster, it's good for CNN, so I win either way. Thank you very much. We're all citizens of our neighborhood, of our district, our school district. That's our first area. Then there's our township. Then there's the county. Then there's the state that we live in. And we can be loyal to all of those. And then there's our nation. All we have to do is carry it one further and say, I'm a citizen of the world, too.
And because what do we want to do, blow this beautiful world up for? I mean, life is good. It's short enough as it is, for God's sakes. It's those people that are buying these ads to make people think that global warming's not real. Who do they think, that we're a bunch of suckers? You know, we know, everybody, every kid in the world knows the world's getting hotter, for Christ's sakes. I mean, you know, you don't have to be a genius. All the scientists know it. They say so. We ought to take care of the forests and the fish and all the other stuff. We ought to take care of our planet. And we're going to win.
I think about the future of humanity mostly, and what we're doing wrong, and what we can do to correct what we're doing, and how I can influence that so that my children and grandchildren and yours will have a wonderful life, the opportunity to have a wonderful life the way we had. I'm very optimistic. We've got a very critical time ahead of us to save this planet and the human species and what's left of the natural world. But with working together, all of us, hopefully we'll be successful.
Let's start here. Ladies and gentlemen, 2 of Ted's unbelievable family members are with us this evening. They've traveled. Laura Turner-Seidel and Teddy Turner, come on up. So wonderful. So wonderful. great to see you both. Thank you so much for being here. What's it like having Ted Turner as a dad?
Well, it's a little different than some of the stuff that was talked about up
really?
here. You get a much shinier picture, but it's
Dinner might be
different. Right, yes. When he's disciplining you in a different way, right? But it is, and continues to be such a great opportunity. I've worked with a lot of folks here, or worked for them. Phil Kent, Stu Snyder.
You worked at CNN.
Yes,
we'll get to that.
Yes,
too.
right. And so the places I've been able to go, and the things I've been able to do, and the things that I've learned from him, and how we can carry that forward, that's why we're here.
Laura, you and I announced this effort on this stage 5 years ago. It was interrupted, of course, our efforts by COVID and a few other things, but here we are. And you are the champion of Captain Planet and the chair of the Captain Planet Foundation. So tell us a little bit about what your family is involved with, still working very hard to advance the planet.
Sure. Well, Dad doesn't sugarcoat things very often or very well. And being raised in a family by a man that you think has superpowers, and he thought he did too. And he does. I mean, look at all of what he's done. But, somebody that believes and invests in and tries to build awareness around the biggest existential threats facing mankind. So climate change, we've been hearing this for years, and the threat of nuclear weapons. It's like Captain Planet and the Planeteers was really Dad's effort. I mean, Dad was a fan of Batman and of Spider-Man, and he's like, well, why in the hell don't we have a superhero for Earth, for the planet? And as kind of primitive as Captain Planet the cartoon was, it captivated the hearts and minds of 40 million youth in 100 countries and 23 languages around the globe. And it really was an experiment that turned out really well, because wherever I go, I am talking to millennials, and they break out and sing the whole theme song. It's amazing.
You want to do that?
No.
Okay.
It's like, what did you do with the money that they gave you for singing lessons? I didn't get singing lessons, but the foundation is operating very well and keeping things going as far as Ted's vision for educating, inspiring, engaging youth. And I just want to say, President Carter, who's in hospice right now, is my dad's one of his best friends and fishing buddies, hunting buddies. And, President Carter commissioned a report when he was president in 1979 called Global 2000. And, the book was published a few years later, but all of that stuck in Dad's head. And that was like really the first foray for him into, what was happening and what could happen to the environment. And basically, he turned that into a 10-part series called Vital Voices for the Planet. And then, Al Gore and Jacques Cousteau, who said Ted, and Teddy went down to the Amazon with him. Ted, it's all over. There's no hope. There's no chance. And Dad's like, come on. You're a scientist. You know that there's chances that we can beat this thing. But we all have to work together. And we haven't been doing enough of that. And young people have been, telling us we're not doing enough. And they're right. And we need to work with them, support them. I think that this professorship, John, it's so exciting. And I just want to say thank you to Frank, because it was actually at a nuclear threat initiative event. If we announced on the stage 5 years ago, then that was like 7 years ago.
No, it was 6 years ago.
Okay, well, whatever.
We were there.
You worked
and Ted goes, how long did you work for me? And I said, well, 21 years. He goes, Laura, come here. You know how long you worked for me? And that's how it started.
Right.
That's
right.
how it started.
Yeah.
Teddy, you worked for your dad. How did that get going? I mean, that must have been fun.
I worked my first job out of school. Well, I'd worked for Turner Outdoor Advertising between my 5th grade and 6th grade year. And every summer I worked for my dad in some strange capacity. The great years were on the boats, but I came home from Maximum Security College, the Citadel, which didn't get a lot of press here tonight, Syracuse and GW and all that. But so I came home for Christmas, my senior year. And Dad said, and this was a reoccurring theme as when I was graduating from high school, he said, son, what are you going to do when you graduate from college? Because, you know, you got 2 weeks to get your stuff out of my house. And I said, well, I think I want to work in the family business. He said, well, what do you want to do? I said, well, I'd work for CNN. I said, that's, you know, up and coming where it's going. I'd like to work for CNN. He said, well, front of the camera or behind the camera? I said, well, I've been blessed with a great face for radio, so I think behind the camera would be great. And he said, well, all right, well, yeah, I think that's good. Where do you want to do it? I was like, where do I want to? I mean, I'm from Atlanta. We're based in Atlanta. You know, I was like, in Atlanta? And he said, well, no, there's no news in Atlanta. We don't make news in Atlanta. There's no news in Georgia. The news is made somewhere else. So 2 options. And I said, well, okay. He said, Moscow or Washington, D.C.? He said, those are the only 2 places in the world right now where news is made. And I was like, how did we get here? And I said, well, guess I could go to D.C. anytime. So Moscow? And he was like, that's it. Go to Moscow. So 2 years I spent in Moscow. It was fascinating because I went from military college.
What was the biggest thing that happened in Moscow while you were there?
Chernobyl blew up. It wasn't in Moscow.
Did you go there? Did you go there?
It was so funny because, right, you guys got to get to Chernobyl. Now, I've been to Afghanistan with the Soviet troops, and I was like, you know, that was kind of scary and dangerous. But Chernobyl, we know that's dangerous. And thank God the Russians wouldn't let us go there because, of course, they were still kind of in denial that it was going on anyway. So we went to Kiev and we spent a lot of time in the hospitals with radiation victims and all that kind of stuff. So it was fascinating, but it was, it couldn't have been a better experience. Dad was right. I learned so much being there and got to work with some great people, Bernard Shaw and Peter Arnett and Stuart Lurie, who was one of my favorite guys ever. And so the experience has been good, but I want to quickly say time. We're running out of time, right? We only have time. What's the biggest gift that we can give? Money, resources. I mean, those things are great, but it's really our time. And you took the time to help put this together, and Phil Ken and Stu and a bunch of folks taking that time, and for y'all to take the time to be here. And that's really the only resource we have, and it's very fleeting. So thank you all for coming and giving this great honor to my dad. Because all of our time is fleeting, and this going forward into the future, so important.
I'm going to come to one more question for you, and then you have something to share with us. What do you want John Sutter to do and to inspire into these students, and for this person to inspire going forward?
Well, John, you've got a big job to do. Obviously, you've got to finish your film, and you've got an amazing podcast, and then you've got a plethora of students that you need to connect to the issue, heart and soul, and then inspire the leadership in this room to even to get back here, to present to your students, and also give them the opportunities to pursue the careers that they want to, because CNN's doing a great job, Discovery's doing a great job, but there are a lot of companies out there that are not doing a great job. So we have to make sure that there is a livelihood in this in environmental media coverage. So it's a lot, but I know you're going to help, and you know, in a significant way. And all of you here, can make another donation or make your first donation. But then, stay in touch with the university and come back to the Earth Day event. It's always on Earth Day or Earth Week. And we know as environmentalists, every day is Earth Day, right? Or should be for everybody. But yeah, I just think that there's a lot of things that we can do. And then plus, we can go home and use our individual superpowers. But when we combine our individual actions, there's real superpower in that. And the youth in this room, the fact that you're young is your superpower. So you can get things done, cut through the red tape.
Your father couldn't be with us tonight. I hope he's watching, and if he isn't now, there's a live stream, and there'll be.
Oh, this is live stream?
Yeah, and then we share.
Philip, is Dad watching?
Yeah.
Yay!
Ted?
Dad.
Ted?
I'll be home by midnight, I promise.
You heard it here, folks. You have something to share with us.
Yes, I do. So Dad is sad that he couldn't be here. I'm even sadder for him because some of the folks I've gotten to see tonight, I know would rather see him than me, but I would rather see them. So it's good. Some of my heroes over the years. But Dad sent a letter, and I will read it. I'm hopefully with my Citadel education.
And before you read that, Teddy, I just want to get one thing straight on your behalf.
Right.
So there was a challenge in the company and an award given to the person who sold the most amount of programming. And Teddy sold the most amount. And then Stu Snyder said, well, Teddy, you deserve that award, but we can't give it to you because you are the son's boss. So we just never got that straightened out. And also, when Dad was in the Fastnet race and they had called us that they were out of touch and the worst could have happened. It was a terrible, terrible day. But Teddy was on that boat with them. How old were you, 13?
16.
16. But anyway, so he's a fearless man of the sea as well. And I just wanted to tell those stories.
Thank you. Dear friends, while I can't be in the room with you tonight, please know I am there in spirit and solidarity. The common bond that weaves us together, our belief in the importance of journalism to inform the future, is forever ingrained in our hearts and minds. Isn't that what it's all about? Using our time on this planet to help leave it better than we found it. When my pal Frank Cesno shared his intention to create a legacy project to honor me for my contributions to the environment and cable industry, I was truly humble and grateful. It is not every day a professorship is named in your honor. No, it's not. I am so excited about the first appointment, and inaugural professor, filmmaker John Sutter will help prepare and inspire the next generation of media professionals. John's creative storytelling, particularly in the climate arena, will not only provide a North Star of excellence, but will help build credibility and greater understanding in a world so deserving. It's amazing to think of all the generosity and intention that went into this honor. Hundreds of donors, including members of my own Turner family and countless friends and colleagues, helped raise several $1 million to fund this position. It means so much to me that so many were inspired to help create this world of difference as a collective. When I think of the pivotal moments that changed my life for the better, they were often associated with cutting-edge stories and documentaries that helped shine a light on issues in the world that humanity needed to understand. That way, we could pivot without solutions as stewards and caretakers in the world. That's why this honor touches me so deeply. To all the future generations of storytellers committed to our planet's well-being, I believe in you. What a wonderful new era for the planet. Thank you again for this great honor. Sincerely, Ted Turner.
All right.
I have one thing.
Oh.
So Dad is aware of the ugliest eyes in the world. He has a great collection, but they all mean something and they stand for something. And I was going to wear this tonight, and Frank, and I just couldn't do it. It's so incredibly ugly.
Okay, it's fine.
And,
Want to put it on
Frank
now?
had said, bring something. If you have something that we can put in our collection, I thought it's the perfect thing because I can never have to wear it again. So for you and the collection.
Thank you, Ted.
So, you're welcome.
I think it's a great looking top.
It's a great look. Thank you both so much. Well, this brings us to the end of an incredible evening. Literally, people have come from all over the world to imagine the world here with us. Chris, thank you so much for joining us. President Wrighton, Provost Bracey, thank you so much for providing the leadership at this university. To Wolf and to Christian and to Kathy and to Wanya and to Phil and to everybody who's participated in all of this. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. To our students, this is about you. This is about our investment in you and the future and the story you will inherit and the story you will change and the story you will tell. And your experience here at this university, where you learn, where you are exposed to ideas and people and places and things that you could never have before imagined, and where you capture that and take that forward, that's what this is all about. That's what we're doing for TED and in TED's name. That's what we're doing for the planet. I really hope that you enjoyed this evening as much as I did. It's been just unbelievable, just unbelievable. And TED, you're with us in spirit and you're with us in inspiration. So thank you for everything that you've done and everything you will do now through John Sutter. And boy, is the pressure on you now, pal. So everybody wave to Ted. We invite you now to step out for a drink, a celebration. If you haven't seen Dave Rust's exhibit, which he brought up from Atlanta, it's right around the corner here in the display case. It is unbelievable. You'll see a Scud missile, you'll see a hanging Chad from Florida, and a number of other things. For those of you who are joining the president for dinner, the van will be over on 21st Street here, and you'll have someone who will show you the way. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for participating in this. Thank you all for being here.